The early light of dawn crept over the sleepy village of Eichenwald, where mist still clung to the surface of the Schwarzwasser River, like a memory refusing to fade. The air was cool, earthy, saturated with the scent of wet soil and pine needles. It was a place untouched by the rush of modern life, where the stillness of the forest was broken only by the occasional bird call or the distant rustle of leaves. In a small cottage at the forest's edge, a soft yellow glow flickered in the kitchen window. Inside, 5-year-old Tommy Wilson sat at the breakfast table, his legs too short to reach the floor, swinging gently above the worn linoleum. He held a tattered teddy bear, Mr. Hugs, against his chest, his fingers gripping the faded fur as if the bear were the last thread connecting him to something safe. His grandmother, Martha, flipped pancakes on the stove, humming a tune that carried no joy, only habit. She glanced over her shoulder at Tommy. He hadn't spoken since the accident, the one that took his father away, and with him, Tommy's voice. The doctors called it selective mutism, a condition born from trauma. But to Martha, it felt like a piece of her grandson had simply gone missing. That morning, however, something shifted. Tommy's small voice broke the silence, so quiet it might have been mistaken for a breeze. "Can we go to the river today, Nana?" he asked. Martha turned, stunned. She hadn't heard that voice in weeks. Her heart, bruised by worry, leapt. "Of course, my little sunshine," she said, placing a star-shaped pancake on his plate with trembling hands. She didn't question it. Not then. Not when hope was such a rare visitor. After breakfast, they set out hand in hand. The riverbank welcomed them with its quiet, unspoken beauty. Tommy walked ahead, closer to the water than Martha liked, but she didn't call him back. Instead, she found a flat rock and took out her knitting, her eyes never straying far from her grandson. Tommy crouched at the edge, skipping pebbles into the current. The ripples spread in perfect, widening circles. He looked peaceful, almost ordinary. But something in the air felt wrong. The birds had stopped singing. The forest was too still. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl of warning. "Don't go too close to the water, dear," Martha called gently. Tommy nodded but didn't turn around. His attention was fixed on a small rock at the river's edge. Mr. Hugs was slipping from under his arm. With a puff of wind, the bear tumbled into the current. "No," Martha cried. Time slowed. Tommy dropped to his knees, reaching desperately for the toy. The muddy bank gave way under him. Martha lunged forward, her heart seizing. He was too close to the edge. The teddy was already floating away. Then suddenly another sound. A splash, louder, heavier, cut through the air. Both Martha and Tommy froze. Something had entered the river downstream. What they saw next would change everything. The splash had come from about 20 feet downriver. Martha's eyes scanned the surface, her pulse quickening. "Tommy, stay still," she said sharply, her knitting tumbling from her lap. Tommy, half on the riverbank and half off, looked downriver. The water swirled with unusual force, reflecting a dark, ominous sky. Something breached the surface. First a snout, then ears, then wide, desperate eyes. It was a dog, a large one, a German shepherd. The animal thrashed violently in the current, its legs churning water but making no headway. A strangled yelp escaped its mouth. Martha felt ice in her veins. The dog was drowning. The shepherd's gaze met Tommy's. Even from that distance, something electric passed between them. A wordless call, a shared fear. The teddy bear forgotten, Tommy crawled sideways along the slick riverbank, tracking the dog's frantic movements. "Tommy!" Martha shouted, stumbling to her feet. "No, come back!" But Tommy kept moving. His little hands and knees imprinted shallow marks in the mud as rain began to fall, dotting the surface of the water with perfect dimples. The dog's yelps grew weaker. Each time it bobbed above water, it stayed up a little less. Martha ran, parallel to Tommy, panic blazing in her chest. Tommy reached a point where the river curved inward. The German shepherd was closer now, caught in a slow whirlpool. It was only a few feet away. Tommy lay flat on his stomach, stretching his arm as far as it could go. The dog's eyes locked onto his. No barking, no panic, only exhaustion and a faint flicker of hope. Just as the dog neared the edge, Tommy's fingers brushed something. A wet, rough collar. With both hands now, he gripped it. The dog's weight threatened to pull him in. Martha screamed and lunged, catching Tommy's ankles just as the momentum started to tip him forward. She dug her heels into the mud, anchoring them both. "Hold on, Tommy," she cried. The dog kicked feebly. Water surged around it, stained with red. Blood. It was injured. Tommy's face, usually so expressionless, was intense with focus. He didn't blink. His knuckles whitened. The dog stopped struggling and allowed itself to be pulled. Together, they inched the animal out of the river. First its head, then shoulders, then finally, all four legs collapsed on the muddy bank. The shepherd lay motionless, sides heaving. Tommy crawled closer, cupping its face in his small palms. Martha knelt beside them, breathless. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You could have been pulled in." But when she looked at Tommy's face, she saw something extraordinary. Clarity. Purpose, and for the first time in months, light. Rain poured now, soaking them all. But none of them moved. The river still surged behind them, uncaring. Tommy began to run his hands over the dog's fur, untangling weeds, inspecting wounds. His movements were gentle, deliberate. Martha wrapped her arms around both of them. Lightning cracked the sky. But here, at the edge of chaos, a boy who hadn't spoken in weeks and a dog who had given up fighting lay together in the mud, broken things finding each other. Something more than a rescue had happened, and it was only the beginning. Martha struggled to lift the soaked and trembling dog into her arms, with Tommy close by, his small hand never leaving the shepherd's side. The animal was heavy, waterlogged and limp, but somehow they managed. The short walk back to their cottage felt longer under the pouring rain, and every step was a battle against the thick, clinging mud. Inside the kitchen, warmth and light greeted them. Martha wrapped the dog in towels, rubbing gently, while Tommy knelt beside her, watching with quiet intensity. The dog whimpered, not in fear, but in pain. Blood still oozed from several gashes along her side and legs. Her ribs showed starkly under her wet fur. Tommy reached out to touch her head, and she didn't flinch. Martha moved quickly to call Dr. Peterson, the local veterinarian who cared for the Miller's animals. "He'll be here in 20 minutes, she told Tommy, who nodded but didn't. "Look away from the dog." They made a bed from blankets near the stove. The German shepherd lay on her side, breathing shallowly. Tommy curled beside her, one hand resting gently on her flank. Martha brought water, but the dog didn't move to drink. Then something unexpected happened. Tommy cupped water in his small hands and brought it to the dog's mouth. Slowly, cautiously, she lapped it from his palms. Martha blinked back tears. Not just from the sight of this act of kindness, but from what it meant. Tommy was beginning to come back. When Dr. Peterson arrived, he was soaked and grumbling from the storm, but his voice softened as soon as he saw Tommy and the shepherd. "Well now," he murmured, kneeling down. "What have we here?" Tommy didn't respond. He never did, but he placed his hand gently on the dog's head, calming her instantly. Dr. Peterson raised an eyebrow. "She trusts him," Martha said quietly. "He hasn't spoken since the accident. But this dog—" "She's in rough shape," Dr. Peterson interrupted softly. "These wounds, some look deliberate. Cuts like that don't happen from a fall." Tommy's fingers tightened, slightly in the dog's fur. She whimpered and pressed closer. "I'll do what I can, clean the wounds, give her antibiotics. But healing will take time," the vet continued. "Physically and emotionally. The dog never once snapped or growled. Even when stitched, she stayed calm under Tommy's touch." "She needs a name," Martha said later, drying her hands. "What should we call her?" Tommy looked up, then to the window, where lightning flickered in the distance. "Lightning?" she guessed. A tiny nod. Lightning it was. That night Tommy refused to sleep in his bed. Martha, exhausted, gave in and made him a pallet next to Lightning. She watched them curled together, Tommy's hand resting on her side. Just before sleep took her, she whispered to herself, "She's saving him too." And she was right. Over the next few days, a quiet rhythm began to emerge. Tommy woke early to check on Lightning. He brought her water, monitored her wounds with childlike precision, and kept her company for hours. Though he still didn't speak, he hummed softly, a tune only Lightning seemed to understand. Martha watched this growing bond with cautious awe. Each act of care that Tommy offered the dog seemed to heal something inside him too. He helped Martha change bandages, gently held Lightning's head during feeding, and even began drawing again. Pictures of a boy and a dog, hand in paw, beneath a stormy sky. One evening, as Martha prepared dinner, she caught Tommy whispering a single word to Lightning: "Friend." It was the first time he had spoken since the accident. The sound was fragile, barely audible, but it was enough. Martha had to turn away to hide her tears. That night, Martha found herself unable to sleep. She walked into the kitchen where Tommy lay beside Lightning. A small flashlight rested beside them, casting a warm glow over the dog's sleeping form. Tommy's arm was draped across her neck. On the floor beside them lay a photograph, creased from age and many touchings, of Tommy and his father, fishing, by the very river that had brought Lightning into their lives. The healing had begun. Just as calm began to settle over the small cottage, it was shattered by a firm knock on the door. Martha opened it to find Sheriff Davis standing there, hat dripping, his expression grim. "Morning, Mrs. Wilson," he said. "I got a call from Dr. Peterson. Said you might have found a dog involved in an abuse case." "Yes, come in," Martha replied, heart already heavy. The sheriff stepped inside, immediately noting Lightning curled beside Tommy, who barely looked up. She was drowning. Martha explained. "Tommy found her. We pulled her out together." Lightning tensed under Tommy's hand as the sheriff approached, emitting a soft growl. "She's protective," Martha added, "but only scared." "I can see that," the sheriff nodded. "Thing is, we've had a report of a missing German shepherd. Man named Rankin just moved into the old miller's property." Lightning's body stiffened. Her ears went flat, tail tucked. Tommy instinctively wrapped his arms around her neck. "Her reaction speaks volumes," the sheriff muttered. "I'll talk to Rankin, but if he can prove ownership, he won't take her," Martha said, firmly. "That man, if he did this to her—" "I'll do my job, Mrs. Wilson, but I'll do it right," he promised. The next day, Rankin arrived with a sour expression and a folder of papers. Lightning immediately went rigid, trembling against Tommy's legs. "That's my dog," Rankin said, voice cold. "Her name's Rex. I want her back." Tommy said nothing but moved protectively in front of Lightning. "Look at her," Martha snapped. "That's not how a dog greets their owner," Sheriff Davis intervened. "Let's not make this worse. Mr. Rankin, she's still recovering. We'll investigate before making decisions." Rankin growled, "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," and stormed off. In the days that followed, tension gripped the cottage like a storm cloud refusing to move on. Lightning never left Tommy's side. Every time a car passed or the wind changed direction, she would growl softly, body tense. Tommy, in turn, became even more vigilant, refusing to leave Lightning alone for even a minute. Martha tried to keep their routine steady. Meals, care, quiet time. But the looming threat couldn't be ignored. She began documenting everything: Lightning's reactions, her injuries, Tommy's progress. If this turned into a legal battle, they needed evidence. Dr. Peterson returned for a checkup. "She's healing well physically, but emotionally that's another story," he said. "Whoever had her before, it wasn't just neglect. It was deliberate cruelty." Tommy hovered as the vet checked Lightning's stitches. The dog remained calm under his touch but flinched at unfamiliar sounds. It was clear she was still afraid of the world outside their cottage walls. Sheriff Davis dropped by again, this time without warning. "Rankin's pushing," he said, claiming ownership, pressing for animal retrieval. I've asked for time, citing her medical state, but it won't hold forever. Can't we do anything? Martha asked. I need concrete proof of abuse, otherwise it's a civil matter. As the sheriff left, Tommy walked over to Martha, holding out a drawing. It was of him and Lightning, standing in front of their home, with Rankin's shadow looming in the distance. The message was clear. That night, as rain fell softly on the roof, Martha lay awake thinking, if they lost Lightning now, what would happen to Tommy? This wasn't just a pet. This was his lifeline. She made a decision. They would fight. Martha contacted an old friend, a retired lawyer, who agreed to help pro bono. They prepared affidavits, collected medical records, and documented Lightning's progress and Tommy's miraculous emotional recovery. Meanwhile, Lightning grew stronger. Her coat regained its shine, and she even began to play gently with Tommy. In the mornings, it was subtle, careful, but it was hope. Every night as Tommy curled up beside Lightning, whispering stories into her fur, Martha knew this bond wasn't ordinary. It was sacred, and she would protect it with everything she had. Two mornings after Martha had enlisted legal help, the house awoke to a rare moment of peace. The sun streamed through the windows in soft golden streaks, and Lightning, now more alert and responsive, trotted behind Tommy into the kitchen. Her gait was still tender, but stronger. Her eyes, no longer glassy with pain, followed Tommy with almost human attentiveness. As Martha scrambled eggs, her gaze rested on the boy and dog who had somehow begun to bring life back to one another. Tommy set down Lightning's water bowl, now part of his daily ritual, and gave her a careful stroke between the ears. She's doing well, Martha said aloud to no one in particular, almost like she's meant to be here. Then came a call from Dr. Peterson. He had reviewed his notes again and something had stood out. I didn't want to say anything without being sure, he said, but there's a chance Lightning might be pregnant. I'd like to come by and check. Martha nearly dropped the phone. An hour later, Dr. Peterson stood in their living room with a portable ultrasound machine. Tommy held Lightning's head as the vet moved a probe over her belly. There, the vet pointed. The grainy screen revealed tiny flickers. At least 4, maybe more. Tommy's eyes widened. He looked at Lightning, then at Martha, searching, her face for confirmation. Martha's hand found his shoulder. She's going to be a mama, she whispered. That night, as Tommy lay next to Lightning, he whispered, babies. It wasn't a question. It was a vow. Lightning gently nudged his hand with her nose. The news of Lightning's pregnancy spread through their small community like a miracle. Neighbors brought extra blankets, puppy supplies, and warm wishes. For a town that had known tragedy and isolation, the tale of the silent boy and the rescued dog carried something rare. Hope, but not everyone took it kindly. 3 days later, Rankin returned. Sheriff Davis arrived only minutes ahead of him. I tried to stall, he said breathlessly. He's got papers and a lawyer. He's demanding a court ruling. Tommy stood behind Lightning, arms around her neck. Rankin sneered. That's my dog, and if she's pregnant, those are my puppies. Lightning's reaction was instant. She growled, deep and resonant. Not fear this time, but protection. Dr. Peterson stepped forward. She's a victim, and I can testify to that. No court will give you custody. Rankin's eyes narrowed. We'll see. As he turned to leave, Tommy did something he hadn't done in months. He stepped forward. You hurt her, he said. Just 3 words, clear, sharp, devastating. The room fell silent. Lightning pressed close to him, her eyes soft. Martha, holding back tears, knew this was a turning point. They had found their voice. Together, Dr. Peterson lingered after Rankin left. We'll need to act fast, he warned. I'll contact an animal welfare investigator I trust. They can inspect Rankin's property. Maybe we'll find evidence to support your case. True to his word, within days, an investigation was underway. Sheriff Davis secured a warrant. What they uncovered chilled everyone to the bone. Barbed wire, with dog fur, blood-stained floorboards, and shallow graves. Lightning had been lucky. The findings hit the local news. The community rallied behind Martha and Tommy. Donations came in. Support letters poured in from neighbors, teachers, even the mayor. Lightning's story had become a symbol of survival, of redemption, and of the healing bond between humans and animals. Meanwhile, Tommy became a constant guardian. He crafted a whelping box from old wood scraps, lining it with Martha's softest blankets. He drew pictures of what he imagined the puppies would look like, giving them names: Max, Luna, Hope, and Shadow. Lightning watched his every move with steady trust. One night, Martha found Tommy kneeling by the whelping box, the photograph of him and his father placed at its edge. He looked up at her, his voice soft but steady. "Do you think Dad would have liked Lightning?" Martha knelt beside him, her eyes glistening. "He would have loved her, and he'd be so proud of you." Tommy smiled, a real one, and Lightning, nestled nearby, wagged her tail gently as if agreeing. Lightning's due date drew closer, and with it came both anticipation and fear. Martha, Tommy, and even Dr. Peterson had done everything possible to prepare, but no one could quite shake the feeling that something, or someone, might still try to take this miracle away. But the tide had turned in their favor. Thanks to the evidence gathered and Rankin's abrupt disappearance, he had packed and vanished shortly after the investigation went public. Sheriff Davis confirmed that the case was closed. Rankin would not be returning, and the court had officially transferred ownership of Lightning to Martha Wilson. The relief was palpable. Tommy, who had feared losing his newfound family, now slept with one arm around Lightning every night. He spoke more each day, asking questions about puppies, repeating stories his father had once told him, and even humming while feeding Lightning. She had become his shadow, his guardian, his anchor. Then, on a still spring morning, it began. Lightning grew restless, pacing the kitchen. Her breaths came quicker, her eyes searching for Tommy. He was at her side instantly. Martha called Dr. Peterson, who arrived minutes later, bringing a calm presence and his well-worn medical bag. Hours passed. Tommy never left Lightning's side, not even to eat. He whispered encouragements, wiped her face with a cloth, and held her paw between contractions. One by one, the puppies arrived. 4, just as the ultrasound had shown. Each tiny life was welcomed by Tommy's gentle hands and Lightning's patient licks: Max, Luna, Hope, and Shadow. When the final puppy arrived, Dr. Peterson looked up and whispered, "You did it, girl." Martha wept quietly. Tommy looked up at her and said, "They're safe now." Over the next days, the puppies grew stronger. Lightning remained an attentive mother, and Tommy, her helper, logged every feeding and nap. He drew each pup's markings in his notebook and recorded their weights daily. Word spread through the village. People came bearing gifts: dog food, toys, tiny collars. Sheriff Davis visited, holding Luna in his arms, amazed by her tiny heartbeat. And then came the letters. Families offered to adopt, but not just anyone. Those who had followed the story felt invested in its outcome. They promised loving homes, visits, updates, and photo albums. Tommy, after much thought, chose where each pup would go. Max would stay. The others went to families. Tommy approved himself. He interviewed each person with quiet seriousness, asking what kind of yard they had, whether they'd be home after school or work, what they'd feed the puppies. The day each one left, Lightning watched, sad but trusting. Tommy kissed each goodbye and whispered, "Thank you." Months passed. Tommy laughed now. He played outside. He spoke without hesitation. Lightning and Max slept curled at his feet. The house was filled with life, with movement, with purpose. One morning, as the river shimmered under the early sun, Tommy stood at its edge, Lightning at his side. He held the photo of his father again and smiled. "You were right, Dad," he whispered. "Family finds you, even when you think you're lost." Behind him, Martha watched, her heart full. Sometimes, the river takes but sometimes it gives back more than you ever thought possible. The end.